On this episode of the YEGMS podcast, I have part two of my interview with Neil Blue. Neil and I touch on a number of controversial subjects, and Neil pushes me a bit. I really enjoyed the talk, so stick around. So, this episode features the second part of my conversation with Neil Blue, and we touch on a number of controversial topics, primary of which we talk about the liberation therapy, or CCSVI, as it's also known. I can't say that Neil and my view on that particular procedure is very different. But it's not something that I've touched on the podcast before, and it tends to be a topic in the world of MS that really gets people fired up on both sides. So I did write a blog post about it a couple years ago, and I'll post a link to it in the companion notes to this episode. And my basic feeling hasn't changed. The peer-reviewed studies that I've read all say this, generally say pretty much the same thing, and what I can say with certainty is not everyone with MS has the vein disorder in the neck that is described by the proponents of that style of treatment. So if not everybody with MS has that vein disorder or those constricted veins, then it can't be the cause. On the same coin, I guess, same note, if it can't cause it and not everybody with MS has that particular vein problem, then it can't cure it. Now, most of the stuff that I've read about people claiming its efficacy is, for the most part, anecdotal. There does appear to be a few studies that seem to give it a little bit of credence, but overall, the overwhelming majority don't. So, but my opinion on the liberation therapy and Neil's opinion on it don't necessarily, we're not trying to attack anyone who's had it done. The truth is, if I had severe MS where I was confined to a wheelchair or it was potentially life-threatening, that's different. And for those people, my heart goes out to them, because I can't honestly say with any amount of certainty what I would do or how I would approach that. So we touch on liberation therapy. Neil touches a little bit on stem cell therapy, and and then he also pushes me a bit. One of the things he pushes me on is empathy, for other MSers, and I've never wanted to come across as though I don't have empathy for other people with MS. One of the things that I've realized is I come at, like everyone, I come at things through my own filter, and I would never want to come across as if I'm not being empathetic to the struggles of other MS warriors. That's a term I'm borrowing from Neil. But I appreciated his feedback, and I think it's important. And the other thing he pushed me on is I have trouble accepting that I can't do everything that I did before my diagnosis. I always have. I've always tried to hide it, and not hide the fact. I'm not hide from loved ones when I have MS. But if I was having a bad day, a bad MS day, I would never talk about it. I wouldn't let people know. I didn't want to let on that somehow my life was being affected by the disease. But in doing this podcast, one of the things that's really resonated with me through talking to other MSers, and to be honest, it's been an amazing experience to have that access to other people with MS, is it's okay to let people know when you're having a bad day. And I know in my own marriage, I'm getting better at doing that and letting my wife know, like, look, I'm not doing well today. I'm fatigued. I'm tired. I don't feel good. I just want to sleep, and I feel okay in finally sharing that. I mean, we've been married 5 years, and it's only been in the last year probably that I've felt like I can voice that, and my wife's been spectacularly supportive. So, I really appreciate Neil's input, and I think he's a fantastic guy, and I think he's a real leader for other people with MS. And as he pointed out, and as he points out in this talk, I refer to them as MSers, and he refers to them as MS warriors. And I think I'm going to start calling them MS warriors. I think it sounds, it's a lot more empowering, certainly. I mean, this was a really, really good experience for me, and it has been talking to everyone that I've spoken to so far, because I'm learning stuff. And one of the things that's come out a couple times in these talks is the spoon theory, which I'd never even heard of before. But I have said to my wife a couple times in the last few months, like, hey, I'm running out of spoons today. And after I explained to her, she goes, oh, okay, I get it. I get what's going on. And wow, what a great feeling. So I want to thank everyone for talking to me, taking the time to do this. Thanks again to Neil. And here's the important part of the podcast. This is part 2 of my conversation with Neil Blue. So listen, and hopefully it helps. So Neil and I have shifted position in the city. He had to go to a doctor's appointment. We agreed to meet later. So now we're sitting on a little patio, air quotes, on Bourbon Street in the mall. And he just said something that I really like, so I'm going to get him to repeat it.
Thanks, Sean. So we were just talking about a variety of different things. And we came across how we were both speaking at the MS Walk this year. And one of the things that I said at the MS Walk was I spoke about the MS Mentor program, but then I also said a quote that was told to me when I first got diagnosed, and it was, I have MS, but MS does not have me. And then at the end of the speech, I said, we have MS, and MS does not have us. And Sean just really liked that. He thought it was a powerful statement, and I'm glad you liked it. I mean, I use it all the time, and I think about it. I use it almost on a regular basis. For me, personally, I think that to myself, and helps me get through some of those days where in my head I'm thinking, oh, I can't do this because I feel sick, and I just think you can just push through it. You can get through this. So.
Well, Neil and I we're sitting here and we're talking, and we were talking a little bit before we started recording again. And one of the things that came out that I think we were talking about how you push forward and stuff. And one of the things that I had said, and I think Neil agrees with, is that for me, I've never wanted to be treated like a patient. And the reason why, and I've told friends and family in this, don't you dare treat me like a patient. I think once you start taking on that persona of a patient, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So when he was saying, I have MS doesn't have me, I really like that, because I've never wanted to be defined by a diagnosis or a disease, or I want my life to be defined by what I do with it, and what I choose to do, not something I can't control. So now we were also talking, and we probably should have been recording when we were talking about it. But we were also talking. We got back to the idea Neil has for the mentorship program, and he was saying that how he'd like it to be potentially not just with MS. It could be broader. I mean, you can have people with different diseases and diagnoses and afflictions, and that were, because I can see where anyone who's newly diagnosed with anything could potentially want to have a diagnosis. Now, and then through that conversation, we started talking about our interactions with the MS Society. And one of the points that we left off on when we left the coffee shop, and I thought was really profound, is I was mentioning to Neil how when just before my run, I got an email from somebody who's somewhat prominent in the MS community, in the alternative health MS community, where they basically said they loved what I was doing with the run, but they couldn't support it because it was supporting the MS Society, and basically that the MS Society was supporting big pharma and blah 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 blah. And then when I told Neil that, he had an interesting counterpoint to that, and I'll let him describe what he had to say.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, basically what I was saying is that people don't realize the importance of the MS Society. It's more than just a tool to support MS patients. It's a lobbying tool. It's supporting us in places where it can't be seen. So they're lobbying the government. They're attempting to, or they are writing grants and attempting to get more funding and more research for MS. And those things don't really have a value because you can't really measure how much money they're getting and how much research that they are directly contributing to. But those type of things are invaluable, and that's why it's important to support the MS Society. And I think people sometimes say, and I laugh when I see this, they say, oh, the MS Society doesn't want anyone to get cured because they just want to make profit and then they'll be out of a job. Well, that's just not the case. I mean, they have our intentions at heart. I mean, I've talked to a lot of them. I think they're great people over there. It's not about a job or a paycheck for them. They're trying to make a difference. They want to help us. So I think, yeah, that's just basically what I said to you. And I think that anyone who thinks that they're just trying to support the big pharmaceutical companies, I think that's just false. I mean, obviously they need to provide information on all sorts of avenues for what MS patients can do, and I think that they do that. And like I was saying too, I think that some of the programs they have aren't necessarily beneficial for guys like me or girls my age. I mean, I'm not going to go to yoga or stretching or group thing at 1:00 in the afternoon on a Thursday, but I think even though we're not getting the benefit that other people are getting from those programs, we're still getting the things I mentioned earlier, the lobbying, the grant work that they do, the voice, the image. Those things are invaluable. The media presence, they have all those connections. That is huge. And not supporting them is not going to help MS, in my opinion. It's not going to help you. The person that you were speaking of that told you that they couldn't support you, I think that their thoughts on the subject are just a little skewed. I wish that they thought differently, but maybe if we had a debate, maybe I could change their opinion.
You know, when I got that email, and you know, as I said to you when we weren't recording, and we probably should have the recorder going the whole time because I think we missed some good stuff. But anyway, when I got that email, it was kind of tough on me because honestly, you know, that particular person, and I'm not going to name him. That's not my style. I'm not going to throw somebody under the bus. But all I can say, it was disappointing because when I initially got diagnosed, with the lack of a mentorship program and a lack of, you know, that resource, that person's the information that person provided, I found of use, and it did somewhat shape my early opinions, which have now formed since. But it all comes back to me I don't like extreme points of view for the simple fact that once you take a hard stance on something, you're not flexible anymore, and you're not willing to listen, you're not willing to learn. And you know, if somebody emailed me today at Sean@ownmultiplesclerosis.com and had any issue with anything I said, and they could actually back it up with some sort of proof, they could send me an academic journal, a scientific paper, some information that I don't know. I'm not against it. I want to hear it. I want to know. I mean, if there's something I can be doing better to be well, I'm all for it. I mean, whether it's diet, whether it's exercise, whether it's, I don't know, standing on your head, I don't care what it is. I mean, I'm willing to look at anything because I just want to be as well as possible. It's not political for me. So it was unfortunate, but it happened. And, with Neil's points about the MS Society, yeah, I mean, I have no reason to believe that they don't want us to get better, or they don't want to support us, or they don't want to help us. Are they a little slow sometimes? Yeah, they can be. But when you have an organization of that side and you have to deal with the bureaucracy, yeah, it's a little slow. I mean, you would like to see answers faster. And when you're talking about something about, with regards to a mentorship program, which could help a lot of people, you want to see that stuff move forward. But, talking to your local MS office, I mean, it's no different than when you're at your job. You talk to one person and they've got to kick it up to the next person. Who has to kick it up to the next person. I mean, they can't just all of a sudden do the genie thing, put their elbows together, blink, and then it happens. And I get it. It's frustrating, but it happens. So another topic, and a dicey topic, and a somewhat controversial topic that Neil and I spoke about when we weren't recording, but we decided to talk about now, is the liberation therapy. Came to light, I think, 3 or 4 years ago initially. And I did write about this on my blog some time ago, probably 2 years ago now. And my personal take on it is this: not everybody with MS, and this is based on the research. I mean, not everybody with MS has the veins, has that vein constriction in their neck, so it can't cause MS. Not everybody who's had the treatment has improved, so it can't cure MS. And then, anybody's personal take on it after that is, I mean, who knows? But Neil's got some opinions on this, so I'm going to hand it over to him.
So, like I was saying to you, and I've said this before too, my stance on I believe it's called liberation treatment, and I've looked into it. Some people call it CCSV. Is that I believe it's a placebo. It has a placebo effect. So people think that they're going to get better because they've heard all these great things, and they've heard these stories where people weren't walking and now they're walking. But the simple fact is that maybe it just helped that person because they felt like they were going to get better. Part of the battle with MS is depression. A lot of people are depressed, and if that creates worse symptoms and causes more relapses from what I've read. So by combating that with something that makes you feel good, it could have the effect of making you feel better. So I don't say to anyone who's had it and says, "Oh, I feel great after." I never say, "Oh no, it can't work." All that. I never say that. I'm sure you do feel great, absolutely. But I'm not sure if, like you were saying, the science is all there. I don't know if it actually. I don't believe that it actually cures the disease. I do think that it does help some people, but I think there's better avenues. Like what we've discussed earlier in this podcast, health ways that you can, eat better or work out or the other medications that are out there that can make you feel good. So I'm not quite there yet. I don't, unless there's something that comes out that totally changes my mind. Yeah, I don't think I'll change my mind on that stance.
And I honestly I would have a tough time disagreeing with anything that Neil has to say. And I think that sometimes, and again, if anyone out there has had the liberation therapy, and they travel overseas to get it, or they felt better, no one here is trying to take anything away from their experience. What I'm saying is, from an analytical point of view, the facts are not everybody who has MS has that vein constriction. That's just a fact. So it doesn't cause MS. Now, if you got some sort of relief by getting the treatment, awesome. I mean, no one's happier for you than I, and no one's judging you. I don't think Neil's judging. No one's judging you here. But just for anyone who's new for MS, I mean, if you look at the Buffalo study or some of the other studies that have been done, the hard truth is that condition, that particular condition, doesn't cause the disease. So, and simply being properly hydrated can actually, stop that particular condition from showing up on a scan. But anyway, so if anyone out there is particularly upset by anything we've said, no one's judging you, and if you had success with it, great. And I'd love to hear from you and love to have you on the podcast. You can email me and tweet at me or whatever, and we can talk about it. Now, another thing that Neil had brought up is stem cell treatment. Now, I have to confess that I don't know enough about it, but he was actually looking into having it done, so I will let Neil kind of delve into that.
Hi. So, yeah, when I first was diagnosed, I was having a lot of relapses in a row, and it's quite scary. Obviously, you're thinking, I don't know if this is gonna slow down or what have you. So I thought, okay, if this medication doesn't work and I'm continuing to have tons of relapses and lose more and more, I'm gonna look at stem cells. What I was disappointed with was that it's very hard to be accepted for the studies in Canada. I was a little disappointed with the amount of information out there from the MS Society. I went to the MS Society and tried to speak to people directly, and no one had much information on it. But it does show a lot of promise. I don't know if it's the miracle cure, because I don't like to look at those sort of things. But I do think, just reading different results and following some people on Instagram and different social medias, people that are having it done are having some success. And there has been a few deaths with the one method of treatment, which involves chemotherapy and then stem cells. But there's a newer, safer method which involves just stem cells. And I don't know all the scientific details of it, so I'm not going to go into it. I'm not going to pretend I'm a doctor, but it looks really promising, and I just wish that there was a little more information. I know that it's relatively new, but I know that they are using it for things such as when Gordie Howe had his stroke. I mean, it's not just MS. I think stem cells will be beneficial for many different diseases, not just MS. So I think it's something that would be good for MS survivors to consider looking into, and specifically asking for your money to be donated to that. Even maybe I know that I did that when I did my fundraiser. I wanted to go to stem cell research, not just because I think it'll help myself, but it's going to help a lot of people, and it's really cool. But that's just my opinion, so I'll pass it over to Sean.
And I think for anyone listening to this, you have to remember this is all opinion. This podcast I don't want to at all ever present the image that we're trying to replace the advice of your doctor or anyone else. But as MSers and for me, looking into and being aware of what's current in the research out there is very important. And you need to educate yourself, because whenever you see something like, for instance, in something you'll see, you can see on my blog is, using something like a paleo style diet to manage your MS. I mean, the truth is, I can't prove that it works. Is it reasonable to think that getting proper nutrition will help you be more healthy? Sure. But that is up for each individual to decide. And it's also up to you as an MSer, I think, my personal view, to do the research and be comfortable with whatever treatment course you're taking. But I think that the important thing is to try. So again, with it, we're going to talk about liberation therapy or stem cell treatment or anything like that. Again, we're all on the same team. I don't think there's any judgment here. 'Cause, I mean, if my symptoms were more severe than they are right now, which are not that bad, would I be looking into, or would I consider stem cell or something else? Sure. And if anyone out there is listening and all of a sudden they're just saying, well, you guys are just a bunch of shills for the MS Society and blah, blah, blah. I mean, come on. that's, as Neil said, they're an advocacy group that is helping to create awareness for people like myself and Neil and some of the other people I've spoken to on this podcast. And, do a lot of their programs speak to me? No, but I'm a high functioning MSer. I live a really normal life. I'm not a support group guy. I can't sit around and I mean, I guess in a way, this is my support group. Sitting here having a conversation with Neil is my support group. I find this far more beneficial, but I'm also as I said to Neil when we weren't recording, my personality type isn't for everyone. Because in my head, there's nothing I can't do, and I don't look at MS and go, "Oh, I have MS. Just stop." I think the easiest way to get me motivated is tell me I can't do something, because I'm going to tell you, I'm going to show you that I can do it. I may kill myself in the process, but I'll try. So the next point here is how people handle and how people project their MS into the world. And Neil and I have both unilaterally agreed that we come from similar fathers in the sense that I remember when I was a kid, and I'll use this as an example, when my dad didn't care if I had a foot amputated the night before. If the lawn needed to be mowed, you were getting up to do it, and if you slept to 10, he'd be merciless on me how lazy and and one of the most impactful things I think my dad ever said to me. I mean, he said to me one time, he said, Sean, the secret to life is this: you just have to be a little bit better than everyone else. You don't have to be a lot better. You don't have to be Wayne Gretzky. You just have to be a little bit better than everybody else, and you'll do fine. And for him, you just put your nose down, you go to work, and that was it. And what Neil's expressed to me is the same thing. And so what we were talking about is how you approach it. Like if you, for instance, want people to feel sorry for you, or if you reject that. And so, Neil, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think more or less what you're trying to get at is just that, is it okay to have a pity party almost? And I'll talk about myself personally. When I got diagnosed, I got a psychologist almost right away, and she said it's okay to have a pity party if that's how you deal with it. She said there's different ways. Everyone's different. You can be an introvert and not talk about it at all. You can be an extrovert and tell everyone. You can put it out there. And there's pros and cons to both. And some of the cons are people might view you as someone who's disabled and lesser and whatever. So it really just depends. For me, I was definitely open about it. I had to be. I was struggling. I couldn't do my job. I was definitely suffering. And I think it did end up being a little bit of people feeling bad for me and a little bit of pity. But I like to think that now where I'm at, people don't feel that way for me. They see me as just a person who's trying really hard to get through. And I think the problem arises when you're having a pity party, in quote, and you're not, and you're just staying in there, and you just want people to feel bad for you. I don't think that's healthy. I think sometimes it's okay to have people say, it sucks and I feel bad for you, for sure. Like if you're having a bad time, and sometimes you just need to hear that. But overall, it's better when you feel like you're not sick. I mean, I'm playing sports now, and people are always saying, you're really good, and they can't even tell, right? And I like that because I'm not getting pitied. I think some people, they push, and I know it's hard, like in the beginning especially. I know what it's like to come home from work and not be able to get undressed, just fall asleep because you're so tired. I get that. But you don't have to put it out there all the time on your Facebook or whatever means you put it out there, right? I mean, you have a choice to kind of withhold some of that information. And that's what I tried to do. I didn't try to put out there too much information. I think similar to you don't try to tell everyone you meet, oh yeah, there's days where I can't barely get out of bed. I can't tie my tie. I can't tie my shoes. I'm having trouble remembering my name. But I mean, those things happen for MS patients. They do. And you just got to push through. And I think if you just put yourself in that pity party, it's just going to bring that sort of energy towards you, and you're just going to feel like you can't get better. For me, I feel like I am going to get better, and I'm going to fight through it. So hopefully everything that I just said made sense to you guys out there listening. I'm not trying to put down anyone who feels bad about it, because I know I've felt bad about it, and I know that sometimes I've just needed people to say, it sucks, but you can get through it. And I get that, but hopefully you'll take away that if you try to see yourself as not disabled, see yourself as someone who has MS, but you're not disabled. You have a disability, but you're not disabled. You can still fight through it. You can still push through. I think that's incredibly important. That's how I look at it, and I think that's something that people can take away from this podcast for sure.
We had stopped recording for a sec, but Neil's actually in the middle of making an excellent point, because I do come across as a bit of a hard ass sometimes, but that's just me and that's my personality. So I'm going to hand it over to him, because he's making a really good point about being able to take some time to sort yourself out.
Yeah, so for all the listeners out there, I was giving Sean a pretty hard time here. And it's not because he's a bad guy. I think he's a great guy. But, I mean, you need to understand that people with MS struggle, and it's hard. I mean, for me, I didn't want anyone to ever think that I was struggling, but there came a point where I had to go to my employers and say, like, I'm really not having a good time. Like, I am really struggling. Like, I can't remember anything. It's important to have empathy for those people, because it's not such a cakewalk for everyone. It's not not everyone can be a functioning MSer. Like, it's just not realistic. But I think that if people are putting in the effort, instead of just creating this persona, as you said, where I have MS and I'm sick forever, if you shed that away and you say, okay, I'm gonna take this on and I'm gonna try to make changes, I think a lot of people would have positive results with MS. I really, really do. And it may not be for everyone, but I really do think that would happen. But yeah, Sean, I think you should have just a little bit of empathy for these people. Not everyone can be a badass 86 kilometer running or whatever, however many kilometers running guy that you are, right? It's not possible, but just have a little empathy. And I feel that for the people out there who are suffering, I mean, I had so many relapses so fast. It was so hard. I get that, and I know it's hard. That first day, I remember when I said, I'm not going to eat dairy, I'm not going to eat meat, and I woke up and I said, today it starts, and I went 3 months and I didn't do anything. That's hard to do, but I think I'm living proof, Sean's living proof, and there's a lot of people out there that can show that you can definitely do that.
Now, just so everybody out there understands, I do have empathy. I do have empathy for people that are struggling, or they're having a bad symptom day or whatever. I get them too. I think it's just for me, sometimes I forget that I've got one or two screws loose, and that it helps me. I don't know. I don't even know where I was going with that. I do have empathy, but just for me, I don't. And this is me talking about me. This isn't me talking about the broader MS community. And for me, I don't accept that I can't do something. I don't accept that I can't do anything that I couldn't do before. I just don't accept it.
But it's okay for you to accept it. It's okay for you to say that you can't be as good as you once were. I think that's important for a lot of people with MS. Maybe not for you because, like you said, you got screws loose, but for a lot of people, that is okay. I know that was something that I had to deal with. I couldn't play hockey. I had to learn to accept that I could not skate, even though I'd skated for 22 years or whatever it was. I mean, sometimes it is okay to say, my best isn't as good as it once was, but it's still the best I can do. And I think if you're doing that, then you're okay. You don't always have to do as good as you once were, but as long as you're trying, I think you're okay. And I think Sean's best is just so happens to be as good as he was before. And I think it's because he works. He's been diagnosed for 8 years now, and he's worked really hard at it. And I think over time it's gotten easier for him. And I think his best is as good as he could have been. This is just my opinion, but pre-diagnosis. But for some people out there, I know that it's maybe not.
And again, I can't disagree with anything Neil has to say. It's what I was driving home at is I have empathy for other people. It's just you look at things through your own filter, right? And when I was training to do that run, when I was telling people what I would do, I would get so many people that look at me like, yeah, right. There's no way you're doing that. And it would just, it would pump my furnace like you wouldn't believe. Because not only did I want to do it, but I was pissed off to people that thought that I couldn't, whether they thought that because of the MS I couldn't do it, or they thought that, you're not built like a runner, or whatever, wherever they were coming from. It aggravated me, but at the same time, I'd like to thank those people that doubted me because it fueled me. And, so if you're listening to this, you're an MSer, God love you. I completely have, completely compassionate for you. So if I ever come across where you're thinking like, Jesus, I mean, that's not, understand I'm coming at it through my own filter. And it's more about how I'm thinking about how it relates to me, not how it relates to the broader MS community. Anyway, Neil, I think we got a lot of really great stuff.
Yeah.
But I'd like to turn it over to you and just final thoughts. Anything you want people to know about you, MS, and if anyone wants to get in touch with you about the mentor program. They can you can get in touch with me and I'll put you in touch with Neil, but if Neil, if you have a way to get a hold of you can let them know.
Yeah, thanks. I guess just in closing, I'm just I'm a pretty regular guy. I just want the best for myself and my family, and I'm working really hard at living the best life I can. The MS Mentor Program is something that I'm really passionate about. I really love. If you're interested in it, I encourage you to reach out to the MS Society and let them know that you heard me speak about it, and it's something that speaks to you. I truly think that if people are able to talk to someone when they're first diagnosed, it will make a meaningful impact. For me, it was huge. The results are there. My lesions have decreased, and I really do think it's because I was able to speak to someone about what I was going through, and not like in an overly personal matter, but I mean, like just talking about the disease in general. The first injection, when you are bleeding a little bit and you're like, wow, that's kind of weird, and you can't talk to anyone about it. It's just nice to have someone there. I think there's a lot of people out there that can relate. I'd love to be in touch with you. If you have MS and you're not interested in the program, but you just like to talk, I'd love to talk to you. I really feel passionate about this. It's something that I know I have to do. It's something that I think needs to be done. But I guess that's great. Sean, thanks so much for having me. I'm glad that you invited me to this podcast. Like I said to you before, you were huge in the beginning, seeing you run. I thought, now I can do it too, right? And I think that people like you, people like my MS mentor that I had, and many others out there provide positive encouragement for MS warriors, as I call them. Sean calls them MSers, but I call them MS warriors. But it provides support for MS warriors all over. And so thank you so much, and thanks for the blog, and thanks for doing these podcasts.
Well, Neil, thanks for talking to me, and I really enjoyed our chat. I enjoyed the fact that you pushed me a little bit, and I think it's awesome. But anyway, Neil, thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon. So there you have it. That was part 2 of my conversation with Neil Blue. Can't say it enough. Neil, thanks so much for talking to me. Thanks for being so candid. It's really appreciated, and I'm sure that it'll help a lot of people. I mean, it helped me. So, some housekeeping stuff. I am going to announce tonight, and I waited to the end of the podcast to announce it, but the Really Long Run 2016 is going to go on May the 14th, 2016. If it's anything like last year, it'll start at 5 in the morning. And if it's anything like last year, it'll last until about 7 at night. I will be running the whole thing. And my next guest, my next guest for this podcast, has actually volunteered to run the whole thing with me. So Patricia, hopefully you're listening. It's out there. You put it on Twitter today, so you better get training. I'm kidding. I mean, if she ran 10K, that would be wonderful. So, and Neil, who I spoke to today on this episode, has also started training to run a bit. I don't know if he's planning on going 5, 10, or whatever. So we're gonna have for sure 3 people with MS running in the Really Long Run next year. Potentially a 4th. Dave, who I interviewed a few episodes back, has said he might be able to do it. He's not sure if he can commit to it or not yet. Hopefully he can, because I think it would be a really powerful for a lot of MSers to see 4 people from your community getting out there, raising money for the MS Society, but also showing people that we can do more. And so that's great. So Patricia, who is the many of you probably already know her. She's the spokesperson for the MS bike, the Johnson MS bike. And this is her first year. I think this is the first year of her going solo from the last ambassador. So I'm really looking forward to speaking with her. And once again, Really Long Run 2016 goes May 14th. If you would like to run, if you'd like to volunteer, if you just want to come out and see a bit of it, if you want to donate, get a hold of me or go to reallyLongRunToEndMS.ca. You can get a hold of me at Sean, SEAN, at ownmultiplesclerosis.com. That's OWN, multiplesclerosis.com. You can also tweet at me at ownms.com1. You can search me out on Facebook. You can find me on the blog, www.ownmultiplesclerosis.com. So if you'd like to be at all involved with the Really Long Run next year, please get a hold of me. Also, I'm still looking for more members for my Johnson MS Bike team for next year. I'd like to get it up to 30 members, and I'd love to have as many MS warriors as possible join me for the ride. It's a great day. It's a great 2 days. It's a great weekend. Great experience. It's great to be around other people in your community, share stories, feel empowered. So if you'd like to join the Battered Piles Johnson MS Bike Tour team, please do get a hold of me. Once again, Sean at ownmultiplesclerosis.com. Tweet at me at ownms.com1. And up next is Patricia in 2 weeks. Talk to you then.